Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome. It's really good to have all of you here, and I'm really excited to be hosting this webinar. So, if we haven't met, I'm Katie Seppi, and I host the Childless Collective, which is an online community, and I do some other events. And then I'm also a World Childless Week ambassador. And so, this topic is one that I'm really excited to talk about because it's been so helpful for me. And so I hope that this is helpful for you. So we're going to be talking about kind of this myth of arrival and how there's really no end point to our journey of being childless. And we're going to share some tools to kind of like help you along the way. So one of the things I realized when I first became childless and was trying to process this is for me, it was such a huge shift. Like I felt like my whole world shattered. I had to just really do some deep self-exploration in so many different areas. But from the outside, I think a lot of people it looked like nothing much had changed, right? Because I hadn't been a mom and now I'm not. It was just like an invisible transition to a lot of people. And I think that that is true for a lot of us because so many of these really important things that happen in our life have markers, a milestone or a ritual associated with it. We don't get that typically with childlessness. And so what I found is that so much of my life changed in terms of trying to now navigate the grief that came with it, thinking about how this impacted my identity, my relationships, even my daily rhythms, how my future would look. And so a few years ago, I found this book, and it's by the author's name is Brad Stulberg, and it's called Master of Change: How to Excel When Everything is Changing, Including You. And I'm going to share some of the tools that he used in his book because I think that they're really applicable to how we can navigate change and transition around being childless while still staying grounded during those changes. And so everything that I'm going to be sharing, all the concepts are from that book. So if you want to dive deeper, I highly recommend it. Again, it's called Master of Change by Brad Stulberg. And I've just kind of adapted some of them to help them apply to our journey as people who are childless. So the first thing I want to talk about is this myth of arrival. So I think, when we have a big change or transition that comes up, it can cause a lot of anxiety. It doesn't always feel good. It's that lack of control and everything feels up in the air. And we really long for this like end point, right? When is the end of grief? What's my new life plan? What's my big one purpose that I'm going to find that's going to make this all feel okay? And I don't think it really works like that. It's kind of a myth, there's no single moment where everything's just going to resolve. And so, I think when we do view it that way, it can set up unrealistic expectations for us and then also potentially add layers of shame onto our journey where then we're also being hard on ourselves. So not only are we navigating all this really difficult stuff, but then we're also, shaming ourselves or feeling like, oh, why is this still impacting me? Why is this still making me sad? And that is just a layer we don't need to add. So the truth is that life's going to keep moving. Our grief is going to ebb and flow. We are going to be reshaping our identity across our lifetime. And so while those things, do ebb and flow, if you're in your deepest grief, it will not always feel like this. But instead of thinking of, how do we get to an endpoint? I'm going to teach you how to learn some new skills so that we can really learn to live fully through the change. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Hang on one second. Okay. I'm on the wrong slide. Let me go back to this one. Okay. So here we go. Sorry, you'd think I would be faster at these transitions because I have been working from home for like 10 years, but alas, it takes me a minute. Okay. So when we have change, or we think about change, we often think about this as homeostasis. So we have a starting point, which is like our things are in order. We're at this base starting point. Something happens that throws us into disorder, gets us off of that line, and our goal is to get back to order. So we want to get back to that same starting line that we began at. But especially with life transition changes like that, we really can't go back to that starting place because it doesn't exist anymore. We've changed, circumstances have changed, the world has changed. And so a more helpful way to look at it is this model of allostasis. And this means that you have things in order, things are as they are, something happens, it shifts and puts us into disorder. And instead of going back to what it was, which is impossible, um, our goal is really to find some sense of reorder. So we're going to reorganize things. We're going to reimagine. We're going to find a new way to integrate this change into our lives, which will put us on a nice baseline again. We can get back to a steady place, but it's not going to look the same as it was before. So there's a Greek philosopher, Heraclitus. I might say his name wrong. So if you're into philosophy, I may have botched that. But he has this idea that you can't step into the same river twice because you aren't the same person when you reach the river the second time, and the water is ever flowing. The river is changing, water is flowing. So both you and the river have changed, and so you can't step into that same river twice. So it's kind of that idea. It's just this, everything is changing all the time, including us. And so, let's see. Okay, so one of the ways that we can try to stay stable throughout change is by changing and allowing ourselves to change and to take some steps. Like if we want to hold our footing, we kind of got to move with the change process. And if we try to resist that, it can actually make our journey a lot harder. And so what we want to try to get into the mindset of is how can we balance acceptance of what is, and definitely give ourselves the time to grieve, work with the harder emotions as part of it as well. But how do we balance that acceptance with also problem solving and helping us move to this new place of reorder? And so some of that comes from, engaging with what's right in front of you and like holding your ground, being able to be rooted and, keep your sense of self, hold on to your values, hold on to those things that are at your core, but be flexible enough that you can adapt to the changes at the same time. And so, let's see. Another thing to keep in mind is these change cycles it's not just like one cycle and it's not one loop. Because change is continuous, we're going to be going through these kind of cycles of change over and over and over. And that is very true of Childless, I have noticed, because it's going to look different from year to year, sometimes from day to day, from decade to decade, and how it impacts our lives and the different change or transition that we're currently working through with it. And so it almost ends up being like kind of some mini cycles that repeat or like mini sets of disorder that we can think about how do we want to try to put this into a new reorder. And, as hard as changes, it can be opportunities for growth and adaptation. It's not always, and I don't think it needs to be, but sometimes it can offer those opportunities as well. So the nice thing about this idea of kind of changing your mindset, building tools to help you along with this change process is that a lot of it is behavioral. So there are things that we can develop and practice that will help us get through cycles of change a bit easier or more smoothly. Okay, so what are some examples? Like how would this apply to being childless? There are so many ways, but I just came up with a couple of examples. So I think for me, I know this is definitely the case. I had to really reimagine so many parts of my life. like I talked about earlier. So some examples of that would be how I wanted to engage with holidays and traditions. What did those mean to me? What did I want them to look like? My ideas about legacy needed to adapt and change. Some of my relationships shifted with, friends, with family members, and I needed to kind of reimagine what that might look like. Definitely shifted parts of my identity, where I plan to derive my meaning and purpose, and how I was going to spend my time and energy. So those are just a couple of examples. Maybe those resonate with you. Maybe you've got other ones in mind. But, reordering, this process of order, disorder, and then finding some sense of reorder, it's not about dismissing loss. There is room for all of that too. But it's more about building a new narrative around meaning and identity and how we want our lives to look. And I think sometimes we, can focus a lot on the things that are outside of our control. And certainly if you are here and you are childless and this is where you have ended up, I'm going to guess there's a lot that has been outside of your control, and there's a lot of decisions that you did not get to make. And so, part of this is being able to shift our focus to, well, what can we still control? What parts of our lives can we put into a sense of reorder that feels good to us? And so it's kind of this ongoing process. And the reason one of the reasons this ends up being cyclical is that you can expect that if anniversaries come up, maybe you have grief anniversaries or, other things that trigger that grief. Maybe there's changes in your family, a friend gets pregnant. These all can be kind of smaller phases of this. There's order, disorder, and then how do we want to reorder it? All right, so I came up with some examples. These aren't real people. I just wanted to give you some examples. Okay, so let's look at Miguel. So after realizing that fatherhood wasn't going to be a part of his future, holidays became a painful reminder of what he had lost. Watching siblings celebrate with their kids left him feeling like he didn't belong. At first, Miguel tried to avoid the season altogether, but the loneliness only deepened. So gradually he began to reorder. Instead of sitting on the sidelines, he worked with his siblings to reimagine family traditions so that he felt more included, like starting a holiday game night where he takes the lead and creating a tradition of storytelling that highlights everyone, not just the kids. And the grief of not being a parent is still there, and the holidays, still carry a blend of that grief, but also he's found new ways to foster genuine connection and feels that he's more included in holidays. So that's just a kind of example of what this order, disorder, reorder might look like. And so we're gonna pause real quick and do a 2-minute kind of exercise here. I know 2 minutes is not very long, but with 60 minutes, I had to be careful with my time. So you could always go back to these prompts later if you feel like you need a little more time. But I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes and go ahead and look at this prompt. So what is one part of your childless experience that feels disordered right now? And what's a small step that you could take in order to move toward reorder in that one area? So I'm going to put on a little background music and we'll do a 2-minute timer. Okay, so that felt really short. Normally when I'm doing workshops, there's kind of more time and we'll come back and do some chatting about what came up for you. But this isn't the format for that, but hopefully the exercises I built in will at least give you something to think about and explore a bit more on your own as well. Okay, so um, this idea of rugged flexibility is really at the heart of this book. And so a lot of the rest of what I'm going to be talking about through this webinar, really this is the core concept behind all of it. So um, Brad Stulberg has this term called rugged flexibility. Basically, it's how do we maintain a strong sense of self uh, while at the same time being flexible enough that we can adapt, evolve, and grow. And research shows that people who have rugged flexibility as a quality are better able to navigate life's ups and downs and excel over the long haul. So the good news is, like I said, this is behavioral, so it's something that we can practice. So let's look at these kind of two terms. So when we think about rugged, we're talking about those qualities of being really tough, determined, durable. Uh, the flexible part is that we want to also be soft, supple, bend easily without breaking. Now, these feel like they're opposites, right? But if you can combine both, it allows you to really develop resiliency, and that can help get you through cycles of change or big transitions. So if you can think of this like this tree here, it's rooted enough that it is stable, it's got its base, and that gives it the power to stand strong and have some stability during a storm where its branches may be all over the place, or in this case, its fronds. So if we are only rugged and we really just only embrace those qualities of that, I gotta be strong, I gotta like, you know, just have that like tough durability, we risk injury, illness, feeling exhausted, feeling burnt out. The good part of it though is that it allows us to be strong. So the flexibility part can allow us to adapt over the long haul. But if we are only flexible and we don't have that rooted part, we risk being blown by the whims of life, and we don't really have that strength or that base core that we need to stay rooted. So it's that kind of finding a way to mesh these two together. And one of the big qualities of embracing a ruggedly flexible mindset is that you have permission to kind of drop the weight of either or thinking and to embrace a more nuanced approach. And so it's this ability to kind of hold strong to what matters and be soft and adaptable. So I have this like quote from the book where Brad Stulberg says, rugged flexibility recognizes that after disorder, there is no going back to the way things were. No more order, only reorder. The goal of rugged flexibility is to get back to a favorable reorder. So how can we reimagine? How can we create something different and new, but that's favorable, that we enjoy? So to maintain a strong core identity, but at the same time, adapt, grow, and evolve. So actually, before I get to that, okay, one of the concepts that has been the most helpful for me in my childless journey is this idea of embracing non-dual thinking. There are a lot of things in life that are either or. It is this or that. It's a binary. It's got to be one thing or the other. But there are a lot of things in life that are actually both and. Two things can be true at once. You can hold two things at once. This, for me, comes up with how I'm thinking about things, allowing there to be more nuance, a more expansive interpretation, letting multiple things exist at once. And it often comes up with my feelings too, where, I used to feel like I've got to avoid this because it brings up grief, and I don't want to feel grief, so I'm just gonna not do it anymore. but I realized I was also missing out on joy. So it's that ability to, you know what, I'm going to do the thing, but I'm going to let both of those exist at once. And it feels weird and it takes some getting used to. But it's this idea of like, can we embrace the both and in situations? And so this non-dual thinking recognizes that the world is complicated, it's complex, it's nuanced, and the truth is often found in that paradox, that it's not this or that, but it might be this and that. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One would be, letting go of your dream of parenthood can be both relieving and devastating. I will say all of these may not resonate with you specifically, but pregnancy announcements can be both exciting and envy-inducing. Receiving compassion from loved ones can be both comforting and it might be uncomfortable. And holding a new niece or nephew or a friend's baby in your arms could both be magical and heartbreaking. So, can we allow multiple things to exist at once in our experiences? Okay, so this also comes into play, this idea of tragic optimism. So this is a term coined by Viktor Frankl, who is a Holocaust survivor and was a philosopher and psychiatrist. And so he developed this concept of tragic optimism, which is the ability to maintain hope and find meaning in life despite its inescapable pain, loss, and suffering. And the idea behind this is that acknowledging, accepting, and expecting that life will contain hardship, that sometimes impermanence hurts, but it emphasizes that humans have the capacity to grow from it and to still say yes to life in spite of all of that. So it's not about denying negative emotions. It's not about seeking out suffering. We definitely want to avoid it when we can, but inevitably we're going to have suffering because it's inescapable. And so it's about how can we accept these hard parts as part of the human experience and use them as fuel for meaning and growth. Caveat, not everything has to have meaning and growth attached to it, but where you can find it. So here is some examples of like non-dual thinking that kind of play into this tragic optimism. So it's this idea that life can be both sad and meaningful. We can experience pain, but we'll also experience joy. Change can bring about anguish, but it can also bring hope. And impermanence can represent an ending, but it also represents a beginning. So, it's embracing that both and. So, research has found that individuals who face life with this mindset of tragic optimism, in particular, those who expect that life is going to be hard and full of change, and they just go into life with that perspective, stuff's going to come up, stuff's going to happen. They have an advantageous physical and psychological response to stress. So it shows that they feel less pain through these difficult times, that they gain more fortitude, and they're more likely to successfully move forward following a disruption or like this cycle of disorder and reorder. That's not to say that they're not feeling any of it, right? Like we're all going to be impacted a lot when hard stuff happens, but just the idea that being able to have this mindset and embrace this can help you kind of weather those cycles a bit easier. And this brings us to another concept that is in the book, which is that when challenges come up, we can try to avoid it, or we can try to turn it into toxic positivity, right? You see people who just say, I'm just going to have a positive mindset, I'm going to think positively, and then everything's going to go my way. the opposite side of that would be that when challenging things come up, you could become excessively pessimistic or despairing. That's definitely the side that I lean towards when I am going through something difficult. But both of those, either being turning to toxic positivity, avoidance, or becoming pessimistic and despairing, any of those options kind of absolve you from doing anything or taking action, because the first part denies that anything's wrong, or you're avoiding it, you're not going to look at it and just keep going. The second says, well, any action that I take is pointless, so why should I try? So the third way is that you can commit to what Brad Stulberg calls wise hope and wise action. So here's a quote. It says, "Wise hope and wise action ask that you accept and see a situation clearly for what it is, and then with the hopeful attitude necessary, say, well, this is what's happening now, so I'll focus on what I can control, try not to obsess over what I can't, and do the best I can. I faced other challenges and other seasons of doubt and despair, and I've come out the other side." So I will guess that this idea of tragic optimism is something maybe that we might have recognized in our childlessness. So, being able to hold that suffering piece, the grief, but also be able to access meaning and joy and find ways for those to live together really lands like directly in the childless not by choice experience. I think it's something that we have to practice and do all the time as we're going through these cycles of disorder and reorder. And so yeah, the grief does not vanish, but alongside of it, we can grow new sources of joy, connection, contribution. We can find ways to reorder that fit our lives and our circumstances now. So tragic optimism is able to both validate the pain while also insisting that life can still hold beauty. So here's our example of this. Again, I made it up. Maya's not a real person, but so Maya's sister recently had a baby, and when she visits, she feels two things at once: a deep ache for the motherhood that she'll never experience, and genuine joy at watching her niece grow. For a while, Maya thought she just had to choose one, either push down the grief and just be happy, or avoid her family altogether because it hurt too much. Through practicing non-dual thinking, Maya started to let both truths live side by side. She brings small gifts for her niece, savoring the bond, and she also allows herself to cry on the drive home. The experience is both magical and heartbreaking, and recognizing this paradox helps her show up for her family in a way that honors her grief while still embracing the love that she feels. Again, with any of these examples, they may not resonate with you. You may be in a place where you're like, yeah, it hurts too much. I'm still in the I need space kind of thing. I can't be around it. So these examples, there's no judgment in these. There's no, if you don't resonate with them, that is totally fine. But these are just what I came up with for the examples. So, okay, we're gonna do another quick exercise. So just another 2 minutes. And this one is, choose one aspect of your childless experience where you notice mixed feelings. How might you make space for both truths? So again, we'll just do 2 minutes and I'll turn on a little music. Okay, so that was our 2 minutes. Again, if any of these prompts you want to go back to and spend more time with, I highly encourage maybe taking some time to journal on your own after this webinar. I do realize I'm introducing a lot of concepts. I tend to go fast, so I'll try to slow down a bit, but if there are concepts you want to come back to, Stephanie does put all the webinars up on her YouTube channel for World Childless Week, so you can always revisit. That way you can rewind, fast forward if there's a concept you want to go back to. And again, all of these concepts are from the book Master of Change by Brad Stulberg, so you could also check out the book and look at it there. I spent a little time looking at the conversation happening in the chat, and it's really fun to see. I didn't get to read all of it, but it's really fun to see that you're having some conversation there and adding the thoughts that are coming up for you as I'm going through this. So thank you. Okay, so we're gonna talk about a new concept, which is one that I really love. It's called having a fluid sense of self. So this is a quote that says, "Our identity is like a kaleidoscope. With each turn, we reset it, not to a former or final state, but to a new one that reflects the here and now positions of the pieces we have to work with. The design is always new because the shifts are continual. That is what makes kaleidoscopes and us so appealing and beautiful." I've used this in a few different like sessions and webinars and things I've run lately because I really love this quote. And it also fits with this idea of order, disorder, reorder. We can't go back. We're not going to be the same person that we were before childlessness. So how do we think about our identity and these different parts of ourselves? How can we shift those into something new that feels authentic and good for us? So the idea behind having a fluid sense of self is that our identity is not static or fixed. So sure, there are definitely parts of us that may stay static and fixed throughout our life. So there are those parts of us that will be with us our entire lives. But there are quite a few parts of our identity that are shaped by different different forces. So the experiences we have, the culture we're raised in, what's happening in the world, our the hobbies we pursue. Like there's so many different things that could impact shifting parts of our identity. And so yeah, our identity is not fixed or static, but it's dynamic. It evolves and it can change and adapt over time in different situations and in different social contexts. So this can allow for greater freedom and authenticity by recognizing that being human means that we have this dynamic and evolving self. We contain multitudes. There are so many different parts of who we are. I think Stephanie's really brilliant I Am Me, a campaign that she does every year during World Childless Week, is a really fun way to see this when people make their posts for social media, and it'll say "I am me," and then it'll have like different characteristics that they feel define them. They're highlighting different parts of their identity and who they are, those different parts that make up them. So, we are able to play with that, right? Those can evolve and shift over time. And that could be like a really fun and beautiful thing to explore. And I think it's also necessary when we are going through childlessness because it may shift parts of our identity or who we thought we'd be. And so when we develop and nurture multiple aspects of our identity, it creates a more complex and resilient self. And so like in the book, it talks about how if you have a fluid sense of self, it can help you be more adaptable because if there are parts of your identity that maybe get shattered or feel out of reach or fractured, you can lean on some of the other parts of your identity to get you through that. And you've got other things to rely on. So an example might be like, you always envision being a parent and you find out that's not going to happen. So you are really shattered in that area. You're thinking about what does that mean for me, and who I am, who I'm going to be. If you have some other really strong core identities, like maybe you really value friendships and you put a lot of uh, energy into friendships, or maybe you're an artist and you can like kind of really go deep into your art. Having some of those other identities to kind of lean into and put more energy into while you're working on that fractured part can give you like some respite, or like other places to visit, other parts of you to lean into while you're dealing with that really difficult piece that got fractured. So I think this shows up in childlessness in a lot of ways because like I said, we do lose some of our sense of self, I think, and who we thought we'd be in the future. And as difficult as that is, I think that if we can kind of explore and develop, nurture parts of us that maybe we want to return to, or maybe they're brand new, like it may give us an opportunity to say, okay, I thought I would be investing most of my time and energy into children. So where do I want to invest that time and energy? It can allow opportunities to think about, what parts of yourselves might you want to grow or develop. And that can be really hard to look at if you're in the very deep raw grief. But I think once you kind of move through some of that raw part, it can be kind of fun to think about, what parts of me do I want to invest in and nurture and put time and love and energy into growing. So an example might be, well, let's see, I already gave an example. Let's see. So, yes, okay. So it doesn't erase that lost part of losing that parent identity, but you are able to integrate that piece into a broader sense of self. So I'm going to give an example here of Layla. So Layla always imagined her identity as future mom. When infertility closed that path, she felt like she'd lost not just a dream, but the very definition of who she was. For a while, she described herself mostly in terms of absence. I'm the woman who couldn't have children. Over time, Layla began to explore other dimensions of herself. She leaned into her love of photography, began volunteering with a local environmental group, and cultivated friendships that highlighted her humor and creativity. She realized that being childless didn't erase her identity, but opened space to nurture new facets. Today, she sees herself not as a woman without kids, but as a friend, advocate, artist, and adventurer, a self that keeps evolving. So I think childlessness, it'll always be a part of our identities, right? Like it's gonna be in there. It's part of who we are. But what opportunities do we have to kind of grow these other parts of us, and can we lean into that and really nurture those? So one of the other tools that is in this book around that really speaks to the rugged part and that kind of rooting part, the staying grounded, is in times of change, look to your core values as anchors. So I don't know if you have done exercises where you think about what your core values are. I just, pulled some up and off the top of my head put some here, but you can go online and just look up like a list of values, and there are people have made worksheets that will list 200 different values. There are online quizzes you can do that will help you identify what your core values are. So if you haven't explored this, it might be fun to take a little bit of time to do that, because your core values, again, they're this way to stay grounded because they can enable you to respond to change. Sorry. Yeah, they can enable you to respond to change rather than just reacting to it. And it's a way to kind of build resilience when finding purpose even when circumstances are difficult. So if you're feeling really unmoored or untethered by this like chaos phase where things just feel really disordered, you can ask guided questions based on your core values to determine what actions you might want to take. And you can make sure that the actions, even through these periods of big shifts and disorder, that you can take action that's still aligned with your guiding principles. And so in the book, it recommends having 3 to 5 core values and having these be your guiding points. So again, if you haven't done this, you might want to explore it a little bit. But when things are shifting and you're in these periods of unrest, you can ask yourself, how can I make decisions that align with those core values? And if that feels distant or out of reach, maybe it's how can you protect those values right now? And one thing that's really interesting to know is that, like our identities, like everything else, your core values may shift over time, and that's okay. It's okay for these to, for you to have different guiding kind of core values at different times in your life, because you may need to lean on different ones, or maybe something that resonated with you doesn't resonate the same way 5 years later, and there's something else that feels stronger. So that's okay if these are shifting over time. And using your current values can also be a guide to maybe finding new ones if there's ones that are shifting. So this is Daniel. So Daniel's always valued nurturing as one of his core values. For years, he pictured that energy going into raising children. When it became clear that he wouldn't become a father, he felt adrift. So unsure where that deep instinct to care and guide could find expression. The absence left him questioning not just what he'd lost, but who he was. Daniel began to see that while the map of his life had shifted, his compass, the value of nurturing, could still guide him. He started mentoring teens through a local program and tending a garden that provided food for his neighbors. By expanding his interpretation of nurturing, he was able to find new and fulfilling ways for this core value to act as an anchor. So I love this example because I think that we may have a core value that we have associated with parenting. So, maybe one of our core values is family, and family doesn't look like we thought it was going to. One way to still have that as an anchor might be to expand your definition of what does family mean. Maybe it means, building stronger relationships with people in your family that might feel distant right now. Or maybe it's really digging into and putting time into developing chosen family and thinking about how you want to create friendships and get more into, community to start developing those relationships that can act as like chosen family. So let's see. Okay. I think my slides get out of order. Hold on. Yes, they did. Okay. We're gonna do another exercise here. So this one is going to be taking a minute to think about one value that feels important to you right now. I don't have a list to put up, but it could really be anything, any value that feels important to you right now. And then how could this value serve as an anchor or a guide for you right now? If for some reason that value feels distant, because maybe it is something like family that feels a bit fractured, you can answer this prompt instead. Where could you create a doorway into this value, even if it doesn't look like the traditional form you imagined? So again, I'm going to do 2 minutes on the timer and put on a little music. Okay, so again, I had a chance to just kind of peek into the chat for a second. It's really fun to see all the conversation that's going on there. Okay, so we're going to move on to another concept here. I hope this one will resonate. I think that it could be really helpful for us as we deal with difficult emotions that come up throughout our journey of childlessness. So this technique is called the 4Ps. So when you go through something that when you're in a moment that is bringing up a lot of big emotions for you that are challenging, you can go through this 4P series. So the first step is to pause and take a few deep breaths. Notice what you're feeling. And then the second step is to process. So label your emotions. Labeling actually has some like research behind it showing that this does help you uh, kind of understand or recognize what you're experiencing instead of just feeling it. So this labeling of your emotions is a really important step. The third step is to plan. So take a step back, take time to kind of consider your options and make a plan for what you want to do. Think about what response aligns with your values. Figure out, what resources or skills can you bring to the situation at hand. Just taking that step back to kind of, process, plan. And then the last step is to proceed. So take micro steps, treating each step as an experience and then adjusting it as you go. So the alternative to this, which is responding, is reacting. So when we react, it's called the 2Ps. So panic and pummel ahead. So it's this like, really acting on those emotions. So it's like, we feel that rush of emotions and we just act immediately. It's that reaction. It's a quick reaction. If we can follow this process of the 4Ps, it allows us to respond rather than react. There's some more intention there. We're taking a step back. We're thinking about it a little bit. We're leaning into, the feelings, really trying to understand what's going on before we act. So let's see. This I think comes up so much for us where we have these panic, sorry, I saw the chat. Panic and pummel ahead were the 2Ps. So I think there's so many times in our experiences where this might come up. So some examples might be, getting invited to a baby shower or having a pregnancy announcement, hearing a parent talk about grandkids. Maybe there's like an anniversary related to some kind of like grief that came up, like a health issue that was part of your childless journey, or like an infertility date or a miscarriage, something that has an anniversary attached to it. There's so many things that can like trigger these really big emotions in us. So got a little example here. I don't know how my slides got out of order. Sorry about this. Okay, so Angela is at lunch with coworkers when one casually asks, "So don't you want kids? You'd make such a great mom." Her chest tightens and her first impulse is to snap back or to change the subject abruptly. So Angela instead practices the 4Ps. So she pauses, she takes a breath, she notices that she's feeling defensive and hurt, and then she takes a second to process. So she silently acknowledges, "This is touching on my grief and frustration. I feel misunderstood and pressured." So she makes a plan, considering that her values of authenticity and boundaries. She decides that she doesn't need to over-explain. A short but honest answer will protect her dignity and keep the moment from escalating. And then she proceeds. So she ends up responding with, "It's not something that's possible for me, and it's a tender topic. I'd prefer not to go into it. And then she steers the conversation toward something lighter. So, okay, here is our next exercise. So we'll again do 2 minutes. So think of a recent moment that has stirred up strong emotions for you that were challenging. And then walk through these 4 Ps. So thinking back on it, did you pause or did you react? What emotions were present? What response would have aligned with your values? And then what first step could you have taken? And maybe you did do these, so you can kind of just go back through what happens through this lens of the 4 Ps. Okay, so I'm to my last section here, and it is on making meaning and moving forward. So sometimes when we go through these cycles of order, disorder, and reorder, it can lead to growth and meaning, but it doesn't always. I don't think everything we don't have to find meaning in every difficult thing that we go through. And if we try to force growth and meaning and purpose, it can make it worse. Because if you think about so much of what's inherent in our experience, we're already hurting, we're already maybe experiencing some fear, we're grieving. We may become judgmental of ourselves or put extra pressure on ourselves to find some kind of value in the experience and to use it as a way to grow and find meaning. And that can put a lot of pressure on us if we're already feeling like all of these really difficult, challenging emotions that we're working through. And so, sometimes in this disorder and like moving from disorder into reorder, sometimes that just means sitting in the wake of something that was challenging and just slowly working to find that stability, put pieces into place that can get you back to some kind of a baseline, help you feel stable, help you have some kind of reorder without any immediate gain or value from it, right? It's just about, can I just get back to something that feels a bit more stable? And that is okay. That is a big part of this process and what we go through. So I want to be really clear about this idea that I don't think everything has to be meaningful. I don't think we have to grow from everything. But these cycles of uh, order, disorder, reorder, they can come with ways of finding meaning and experiencing growth. So if growth and meaning do come, they will unfold on their own schedule. We really need time to process first that like chaos phase of disorder. And even once we get that stability into reorder, that might not be the time where growth and meaning occurs. It might happen quite a bit later. We need time to like process and get into that stability for that to kind of unfold. So while we can't force new growth and meaning, there are a few things that we can do to kind of help usher them in or to kind of have a mindset that leans towards that. So one is to practice humility and surrender. So part of this is just like being able to accept reality. So there's a term, radical acceptance. If you haven't heard of it, you can look it up. There's a lot online about it, but this idea that we really have to get to that place of just accepting what is in order to move forward. And that can be really hard, and it can be a process we have to do over and over, right? And the next one is to, release our need to fix or control things that are unfixable or uncontrollable. So recognizing, where we don't have control and not investing in that, but instead focusing on what is within our control. Another one is to ask for help and receive help, nurture friendships and community, find support. Another one is voluntary simplicity. So are there things that you can do to simplify your life right now? Like I think in these phases of disorder where everything feels chaotic, is there anything that you can do in your life that will help to simplify it? So that could be taking out, any kind of clutter, physical, psychological, or social. Finding routines and rituals can be really important during these times of disorder where things feel chaotic, there's a lot of change, because routines and rituals can kind of become those little anchors of predictability and create a sense of order during times that feel disordered. And, maybe meaning and growth feels too big right now in terms of, what you're going to get out of this process. But one thing that I think we can always do is to, when we're suffering, are there ways that we can turn that into compassion for ourselves? So developing more self-compassion for what we're going through and being kinder to ourselves, and also being compassionate for others. So, hopefully if we practice some of these different tools, each time we have these, major cycles of order, disorder, and reorder, the next one becomes a little bit easier. I think I don't know, we might tend to think that like our life kind of just goes along and we don't have these cycles very often, but in the book it says that most people have some kind of major cycle of order, disorder, reorder every like 18 months. So it might not be as big as like realizing you're going to be childless, but change is a part of our life. So whether it's a big cycle of this or just little mini cycles that need to be resolved, it is something that like change is inevitable. It's something we have to learn how to get through. And yeah, so okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and just do a couple wrap-up thoughts, and then we'll bring Stephanie back on. I know I went a couple minutes over, so I apologize for that. But yeah, so in closing here, change is ongoing. There is no finish line, and if we can remember that instead of trying to think about, oh, I just got to get through this to the end of it. I got to get to the end of grief. I've got to find my big purpose and then it'll all feel okay. It unrealistic. We got to go through these cycles and they're going to keep coming up. So hopefully this, gave you some tools to think about incorporating into your experience. And again, these all came from the book, Master of Change. So if you want to dig into this more, it's a great book, and you can. There's way more than what I was able to present in an hour in there. So highly recommend it. So thank you for being here. I hope it was helpful. And yeah, all right, Stephanie.